After watching the final episode of Season 1 of the new era of Doctor Who, I decided to go back and compare this two-parter with the previous season finale story that Russell had written for the show, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End from Series 4. Empire of Death and Journey's End share some key similarities. Both stories feature the return of an iconic classic Who villain, Sutekh for Season 1 and Davros for Series 4. Both episodes follow on from a very strong opening story and a fantastic cliffhanger, only to deliver a somewhat middling conclusion riddled with plot contrivances. And both feature the iconic returning villain in question being defeated by a baffling deus ex machina that leaves fans of that particular villain thinking, was that it? After all that? It's no secret that I find Journey's End to be a disappointing story for many reasons. How it utilises Martha, my favourite Russell T Davies era companion, the bizarre decision to have Donna conveniently forget that she possesses all the Doctor's intelligence when the plot demands it, and of course the frankly ridiculous way in which the Daleks are defeated, pressing random buttons on a console that has no practical reason to exist in the context of the setting to make all the Daleks spin around and magically explode. And it seems that many of Russell T Davies' typical finale tropes haven't faded with time, as Empire of Death presented the fandom with a similarly underwhelming conclusion, Sutekh being defeated by a rope and a whistle of all things, and somehow being defeated by the time vortex despite the fact that he had been travelling in it for millennia at this point. If I had to guess, I'd say that the reason why the fandom in general seems to be willing to overlook Journey's End's flaws to the extent that it does is because the episode garnered a lot of goodwill from fans by simply featuring the characters that they liked, regardless of how they were used or how good the actual conclusion was. And I'll hold my hands up and say that's absolutely fair enough. I have very similar feelings towards The Power of the Doctor, which like Journey's End has a weak and overcomplicated story that is elevated by the sheer charisma of its cast and the novelty of seeing different characters from across Doctor Who interact. But one thing about my Journey's End rewatch that did stick out to me, above my comparisons to Empire of Death, was the interesting situation of Dalek Caan's prophecy and its aftermath. Let's get stuck into the implications of Caan's prophecy, the aspects of it that were fulfilled and those that weren't, and the idea that it may yet be fulfilled at some point in the future of Doctor Who. So what exactly was Dalek Caan's prophecy? Well, he actually had quite a few, some of which were outright lies designed to trick Davros into orchestrating the destruction of his Dalek Empire. But after travelling through the time vortex and seeing all of time and space, Caan delivered to us three fundamental predictions. First, that the Doctor would return as a threefold man. Second, that he would bring about the end of everything Dalek. And third, that his most faithful companion would suffer an everlasting death. So let's tackle these one by one. In terms of Journey's End specifically, it would seem as though these three prophecies were fulfilled. The Doctor returned as a threefold man, as himself, as the Metacrisis Doctor, and as the Dr. Donna. Thanks to the fact that the Dr. Donna briefly forgot who she was for some inexplicable reason, the Metacrisis Doctor destroyed Davros' new Dalek Empire with magical button-pushy powers. And this seemed for a while to be the end of everything Dalek that Caan had predicted. And finally, Donna received an everlasting death by being reverted from most important character in the universe to just a regular schmuck, not important at all despite everything she had done. However, at least two of these three prophecies have since been seemingly undone. The Daleks did eventually return in the very next series, using a progenitor device to restore their race and rebuild their empire in the post-Time War universe. And upon returning to the position of showrunner for the 60th anniversary, Russell also rolled back the third prophecy, restoring Donna's memories and saving her from the everlasting death of being a regular human living on Earth in the 21st century. So what can we conclude from this? Well, there are a few possibilities. Maybe Dalek Caan was just truly insane, and his prophecies meant nothing. They were only important because we invested importance in them, or something like that. Maybe the prophecies were only meant to be temporary, and Caan embellished them slightly with phrases like the end of everything Dalek and everlasting death, when really it was more like the end of this current iteration of Daleks and temporary exile to London. But assuming that Dalek Caan really was capable of seeing all of time and space, a more exciting possibility becomes apparent now that several of his prophecies have been seemingly undone or overwritten. What if Caan wasn't actually referring to the events of Journey's End at all, and his prophecies relate to events that are yet to occur? After all, there are lots of other instances of the Doctor manifesting as threefold. The Three Doctors, Day of the Doctor, Flux. Maybe this triumvirate manifestation will happen again, and the recent bigeneration resulting in the 14th and 15th Doctors existing at the same time has already set up 2/3 of this idea. Perhaps the final end for the Daleks that Caan predicted will occur in a future finale, hopefully with a more satisfying conclusion for them, or at least one that doesn't involve a button-pushing deus ex machina. And maybe the most faithful companion doomed to meet their everlasting death was not Donna at all, and is in fact a later companion, Ruby perhaps, or Susan, or maybe a new character that we haven't even met yet. Or it could even be Sutekh. After all, he was attached to the TARDIS that whole time. Could he be the most faithful companion that Caan was talking about? Alternatively, of all the creatures capable of inflicting an everlasting death on someone, Sutekh, being the god of death, will be a prime candidate. So maybe we haven't seen the last of him, just as Journey's End was not the last we saw of the Daleks. What do you think? What are your thoughts on Season 1's conclusion? Do you think that Dalek Caan's prophecy is yet to be fulfilled? Do you think we'll see Sutekh again, perhaps even as an aspect of a future Dalek story? Let me know in the comments below.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to
Dalek Bumps.